Let's dive right into this. Welcome to This Explainer. If you're tuning in today, chances are you've had a day, or let's be real, maybe a whole year, where everything just feels overwhelmingly chaotic. We've all got that lingering sense that things are just spinning out of control. But what if I told you there are structural, science-backed ways to actually survive this chaos? Today, we're digging into a fascinating pile of data and research to build you the ultimate survival guide. We're going to decode the hidden mechanisms of your brain, your body, your career, and yes, we are even going to look at the literal end of the world.
Because modern life really does feel like the world's end sometimes, right? So, how do we survive it? Today, we're mapping out a journey, starting from the tiny, microscopic apocalypses of your daily anxiety, all the way up to the ultimate macro perspective. Let's get started.
Part 1. Taming your anxious mind. To get a handle on things, we first have to understand the mental battleground. The research shows that anxiety often stems from a false perception of scarcity. Your brain triggers this intense fight, flight, or freeze response, literally pumping you full of cortisol and adrenaline because it genuinely believes there isn't enough food, safety, or social connection to go around. It's essentially an ancient survival mechanism completely overreacting to our modern world.
So when you're spiraling, your brain desperately needs immediate proof that you're actually safe. And we can manually override that alarm system with a rapid grounding exercise. By intentionally touching 3 objects and really noticing their texture, then identifying 3 things you can see, and finally tuning into 3 distinct sounds, you immediately yank your brain right back into the present moment. This sends a direct all-clear signal to your parasympathetic nervous system. That's the part of your body responsible for resting and digesting.
We can actually build on this with a totally fascinating physiological hack drawn from EMDR therapy. If your mind is racing with those anxious thought loops, do this. Pick a single visual spot and lock your eyes onto it. Keep your eyeballs completely still. It turns out your brain actually requires microscopic eye movements to recall memories and process active thoughts. By freezing your eyes, you're literally interrupting your brain's mechanical ability to spin those anxious wheels. It essentially forces a hard mental pause.
Now, this requires a massive paradigm shift in how we relate to our own minds, especially if you deal with rumination or pure OCD. We totally torture ourselves trying to control our thoughts, judging ourselves for the weird or dark things that randomly pop into our heads. But the sources highlight this huge realization. You cannot control your thoughts. They don't define you. They're literally just random neurological firings. The second you stop fighting them, stop overanalyzing them, and just let them exist like clouds passing by in the sky, you completely strip them of their power over you.
But if you just can't let them go, try this technique: scheduled worrying. I know it sounds totally crazy, right? Worrying on purpose, but it absolutely works. You pick a consistent time, let's say 6 p.m. every day. For exactly 15 minutes, you write down every single anxiety you have. And when that timer goes off, you physically step away. If an anxious thought pops up at 10 a.m., you literally tell your brain, nope, we're dealing with this at 6 p.m. You're training your brain to keep its worries on a designated track, which drastically reduces chronic stress throughout your day.
Which naturally leads us to our next big question. We've talked about mental hacks, but can basic physical movement directly fix your mental state? Let's transition over into physiological interventions, because it turns out the way you move your body fundamentally alters the chemistry of your brain.
The science behind simply going for a walk is absolutely incredible. Just a 20-minute walk actively lowers cortisol, switching you out of that sympathetic stress mode. But it goes way deeper than that. Walking enhances your mitochondria. Those are your cell's energy factories. It increases natural killer cells in your immune system. It even boosts the microbial diversity in your gut. Your body is literally flushing out stress hormones and rebuilding itself just by putting one foot in front of the other.
And there's this deeply counterintuitive fact about oxygen here. We always assume those intense, heavy-breathing workouts are the best way to oxygenate our bodies. But to actually deliver oxygen deep into your tissues, your blood requires carbon dioxide. Intense over-breathing floods you with oxygen, sure, but it lacks the CO2 to properly deliver it. Low-impact walking creates this perfect balanced chemistry of oxygen and CO2, making it vastly superior for deeply nourishing your cells.
Part 2. Navigating rejection and laziness. Okay, we've optimized the internal machine, but now it's time to tackle our external challenges. Social rejection, irrational phobias, and that crushing lack of motivation we all love to call laziness. The really great news from the sources is that these aren't permanent personality flaws at all. They're highly solvable systemic hurdles.
Let's start with romantic or social rejection. Okay, cool. Good luck. It's sassy, it's brief, and honestly, it is the ultimate armor. Rejection destroys us when we view it as a failure of our own worth. But as our sources point out, rejection isn't a failure, it's simply redirection disguised as pain. Sending a text message like that leaves your dignity entirely intact. You just accept that you're going to be wrong for a lot of people, and you keep moving forward without over-explaining yourself or getting bitter.
And if your social fears are more specific, like severe phone anxiety or a phobia of driving, the mechanics of overcoming them are exactly the same. It is all about deliberate, progressive exposure. If you hate the phone, take deep breaths, write out some notes so you don't freeze up, and just call a local store to ask for their hours. Then hang up. Super low-stakes practice. If it's driving anxiety, set tiny intentions, manage your breathing, and if panic hits, pull over, let the wave pass, but do not abandon the drive. Step by step, you reclaim your territory.
Part 3. Rewiring your dopamine system. So many of us beat ourselves up for being lazy when we can't focus on studying or working. But the sources reveal something huge. Laziness isn't a character flaw. Your brain's dopamine system has basically been hijacked by the constant, zero-effort novelty of short-form videos and digital scrolling. Your baseline for pleasure is so artificially high right now that normal tasks don't even register as stimulating anymore.
We have to reset that baseline. How? By enduring complete, unadulterated boredom. Literally spend 15 minutes a day with no phone, no music, no stimulation whatsoever. Just sit and stare at a wall. At first, your brain is going to scream in withdrawal, but quickly your stimulation threshold drops. Once your brain is starved of its junk food dopamine feast, suddenly the delayed gratification of reading a book, finishing a project, or studying actually starts to feel rewarding again.
Part 4. The beauty of boring. It's time to rethink the modern and honestly pretty toxic obsession with finding your absolute dream job. We are constantly pressured to find something we're passionately in love with for 40 hours a week, but our sources take a hard look at this and suggest we might have it entirely backwards.
To understand why work often feels so miserable, we have to look at the brain's ventral striatum, also known as the seeking system, which is what drives human curiosity. Before the 1890s, a worker might craft a whole shoe from start to finish. But with Henry Ford and mass production, work was intentionally broken down into tiny, disconnected, highly repetitive tasks. The system intentionally removed human curiosity in the name of efficiency and scale. That's exactly why so many modern roles feel deeply unfulfilling. Our innate biological need to explore is actively suppressed by rigid corporate structures.
Highly desirable industries, like gaming or fashion, know you're desperate to be there. And that allows them to get away with toxic cultures, abusive management, and massive amounts of unpaid overtime, simply because there's a line of people waiting to replace you. Now contrast that with a completely mundane, boring corporate job. These places usually have experienced managers who just want to do their job and go home. They've clear boundaries, and there's far less emotional manipulation.
And let's look at the financial reality. According to the data, a median employee at a legacy, totally unglamorous company like GM makes over $77,000 a year. Compare that to a hyped-up, exciting company like Tesla, where the median is only around $56,000. If you're working to make a living, maximizing your pay in a low-stress, boring environment allows you to actually afford to pursue your true passions outside of work, completely on your own terms.
Okay, pause. We've covered anxiety, we've covered walking, dopamine detoxes, and getting a boring job. But let's take a massive step back for a second. What if the world actually ends? Not the metaphorical, I had a bad weekend of the world, but the literal, sky is falling end of times. For our ultimate macro perspective, we're turning to one of the most famous apocalyptic texts in all of human history.
Part 5. The literal biblical apocalypse, the ultimate macro. According to the book of Revelation, as recorded by John the Apostle while he was exiled on the island of Patmos, the end of the world is a highly structured, truly terrifying sequence of events. Now, looking at this ancient source material impartially, it's pretty fascinating how vividly these prophecies map right onto our very modern fears of ecological collapse and global warfare.
The text describes the breaking of 7 seals. It kicks off with the famous 4 horsemen. The red horse brings global war. The black horse brings soaring food prices and severe famine, a scenario where the rich might survive, but the poor starve. The pale horse brings death and disease, wiping out a quarter of the earth. In a modern context, these ancient descriptions eerily mirror our contemporary anxieties about World War III, cost of living collapses, and devastating global pandemics.
And it just escalates from there. The text outlines the sounding of trumpets, bringing catastrophic judgments. A star named Wormwood falls, poisoning the water, which some modern readers interpret as nuclear fallout. The sun darkens, hinting at a nuclear winter.
There are wild descriptions of locusts with iron breastplates that torture humanity, and the mobilization of a massive 200 million strong army from the east. The visceral, apocalyptic detail in the text is incredibly severe, portraying total planetary system failure.
Finally, the source details the endgame of the tribulation. A unified global authority rises up, enforcing a system where no one can buy or sell without the mark of the beast. This leads to the ultimate cosmic conflict, the Battle of Armageddon, where divine forces intervene. The text concludes with a final judgment, the defeat of the beast, and the eventual creation of a perfect, peaceful new heaven and earth, completely free of pain and suffering.
So, let's bring this all back to you. We've journeyed from microscopic, daily panic attacks all the way to ancient visions of a burning planet. Here's the takeaway. Unless you are currently dodging the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, your daily challenges are entirely survivable. You know exactly how to ground your anxiety, you know how to reset your dopamine, and you know how to navigate your reality. You literally have the ultimate survival kit. So, the only question left is, what are you going to conquer today? Thanks for joining me on this explainer.